little earlier on Friday than we usually do, but trying to leave some things open for later today if plans go a certain way. I am Flying Ryan Gokers along with
Tampa Motor Mouth, Joel Verone. Happy New Year's Eve, as some
yes
people
the
say.
the last show of 2022. Only one more full week of the football season after this. The last week of fantasy football for most people, unless you're in ESPN leagues or in a sociopath league that has week 18 championships, which is not great. We're getting down there. We were treated to a fantastic, and I use that very, very loosely,
Hashtag,
Thursday.
hashtag sarcasm.
Yeah, a fantastic Thursday night football game between the Dallas Cowboys and a Pop Warner team in Titans jerseys. Um, Honestly, the
Yeah,
Titans didn't play too bad.
well, yeah, because you have to think about it. Since I was definitely listening to the game, and in between every third time when they were talking about Wendy's peppermint frosties, just because
Not a
just like,
sponsor.
oi. Anywho, in between players being injured, it seemed every other play you would have, and Dak Prescott with a touchdown to Dalton Schultz. Said, why did he do that two touchdown game about 3 weeks ago when it was actually fantasy relevant for me as opposed to this week when it's anywho.
Relevant for someone out there, I'm sure.
Hey, but yeah, and then right afterwards, there's a Titans defender who's down on the field. But literally every other play, somebody was down on the field, clutching a knee, clutching an ankle, clutching something.
Yeah.
I mean, I wondered what the under over was for injuries. As I remember back to the old Madden '92 game, I wonder how many times would the ambulance have come out?
Several in this one. Surprise start for Joshua Dobbs. We kind of thought Malik Willis. No, Joshua Dobbs gets a start. Doesn't play terribly. First start in his career. Formerly
He
of the University of Tennessee. Wasn't awful.
didn't didn't light the world on fire, but not too bad. Actually, didn't suck.
Better than Malik Willis. Of course, no Derrick Henry for the Titans, no Tony Pollard for the Cowboys in this one. Joshua Dobbs, 20 of 39, 232 yards, one touchdown, one interception. The rushing game, not great in the absence of King Henry. Hassan Haskins leading the way, 12 carries for 40 yards. Jonathan Ward, who you've probably never heard of, 4 carries for 26 yards. Julius Chestnut, who you've probably never heard of, 4 for -1.
I sense a trend here.
Yeah. Julius Chestnut, one long catch for 33 yards was his only impact. Traylon Burks led the way in receiving yards, 4 for 66. Robert Woods, 39 on 5 catches and a touchdown.
And,
Yeah, it's
and
not a good lineup right now for the Titans.
this game was absolutely brutal for gambling because you had, of course, the about the only guaranteed not sweating bullets. And excuse me for coughing. We don't have a cough button for Be Live, but we have, of course, Dallas straight up won. But if you ended up getting ATS, you ended up pushing. So that means I was lost because the line closed at 14. And how about sweating the over under final total 40 over under 40.5? Good gracious.
Hey, you think Vegas knows what's going to happen? Because they're always right on it with these lines. Dallas not as beat up as Tennessee by any means. Of course, no Tony Pollard, as previously mentioned.
The
Dak
Tennessee
Prescott,
the
not his best
Tennessee
game.
Titans defense really almost better than the offense because they ended up really giving Dallas some trouble.
Yeah, Dak Prescott, 29 of 41, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, both to Dalton Schultz, but also 2 interceptions. The Titans were in this game down 17-13 late into the third quarter, early fourth quarter. Really kind of surprising they were that close. And then Dallas pulls away in the fourth quarter to put this one out of reach. On the rushing side, Malik Davis, high rushing numbers for the rookie. 10 for 39. You might be asking, well, what happened to Zeke? Well, Zeke played. He got 19 carries, only 37 yards, but did get a touchdown, salvaging a decent fantasy night. Of course, Tennessee has a pretty good run defense, so no surprise that the rushing numbers weren't there. The passing, though, that's where it got good. CeeDee Lamb, 11 catches for 100 yards, a good PPR night, 21 points. If you're in full PPR, that's not too shabby for your championship matchups. Along with Dalton Schultz, 7 for 56, but 2 big touchdowns. If you had one or both, I'm in a league where a guy in the championship matchup, the guy who knocked me out last week, has both of these players. He's off to a very good start to his fantasy football Super Bowl. Let's see what he got. This is half PPR, 39.6 between the two of them to open up a pretty nice margin on the projection.
You pretty much for Dallas was pretty much also the same story. I think for Tennessee, only less so because of their lack of scoring. As there was Schultz, Lamb, Prescott, and everybody else pretty much really disappointed you if you started them. And with Tennessee, definitely rougher, but the top three were definitely Woods, Burks, and of course Dobbs. As if you started somebody like Noah Brown, or even as you mentioned Ezekiel Elliott, you're probably scratching your head and going, "What up?"
Yeah, thankfully Zeke got the touchdown, or else he would have been a horrific experience in the first place for the fantasy Super Bowl. Malik Davis, if you had the gall to pick him up and start him, he did net 23 yards through the air, plus those 39 on the ground, plus 2 catches. Pretty close to Zeke's numbers in PPR from someone you could have picked up off of the waivers, but all in all, not a competitive matchup. It ends up being 27-13. Dallas running away with this one in the fourth quarter to match the point total spread. And the Titans fall to 7-9, which means we have officially gotten to a point where we can say the AFC South will be won by either the Jacksonville Jaguars or a team below 500, guaranteed. We're pretty close to that in the AFC or the NFC South as well. We might have 2 teams below 500 in the playoffs, but Tennessee falling to Dallas. Dallas keeps their hopes for not only the division, but the number 1 overall seed alive. They need a ton of help to get either of those things, including the Eagles to completely lose the rest of their games. And they play the Saints. We're in the NFC South, so it's not likely that's going to happen.
And if you look at the Titans' last 6 games, of course, 27-13, this one, 19-14 against the horrific Houston Texans, 19 points. Chargers, 17-14, all 3 losses. 35-10 Eagles, absolutely completely blown them out. And of course, the Bengals, close but no cigar, 2016. And looking at history, with the matchup ahead, next week, Jaguars absolutely eviscerated them. It's 36-22. So not a lot of good prospects for the Titans going into next week.
I think if you're a Tennessee Titans fan, you see Jacksonville, you pretty well think that the Jags are going to win this division. But of course, any given Sunday, anything can happen. It doesn't matter what happens with Jacksonville and Houston. Jacksonville can win and lose next week. They're still out. They lose this week. They're screwed. It doesn't really matter. So they can win next week. Winner take all game in that respect. We'll see. That could be the Sunday night finale. It's a guaranteed win-in game, and that's something NBC loves to have in that game 172 of the regular season, that last primetime night game Sunday night. I think we're going Bengals Ravens. I think, but if things go one way this week, we could be looking at 7-9 versus 7-9 for a division title, win and go to the playoffs. Yeah, just want to throw that out there because NBC does like that style game.
What a year this has been parity-wise across the whole league.
Yeah. It's been pretty rough. All right, Patriots have ruled out Devontae Parker, Jonnu Smith, and a couple cornerbacks, so that is good news for the Dolphins, who are going to be officially without Tua Tagovailoa. Xavier Howard, Bradley Chubb, Ingold, who's been pretty important to this team lately, Tyron Armstead, all questionable as well, so that could be a big loss or a big gain. Speaking of a possible big game, the 49ers, Deebo Samuel did practice. He's at least got a shot to play on Sunday. Probably not somebody you want in your fantasy lineup for the first game back from a pretty serious injury, but at least he's back on the practice field. If you have a Week 18 playoff matchup and he plays this week, he might be a good go in the Week 18 finale. Stephon Diggs for full participants, so that's a good news sign there. A.J. Brown and Miles Sanders both upgraded to full participants, so good news on the injury front there. However, quarterback Jalen Hurts is listed as doubtful with that shoulder injury, not out
That's got to be definitely discouraging if you're trying to plan with, okay, do I roll with who I rolled with last week, or do I take a shot with Hurts this week? And when you hear the head coach go, well, we're still all sorting it out, and you're going, thanks, that's a big help.
The only way that doesn't hurt you is if you were rolling with Gardner Minshew in the relief of Jalen Hurts, which is what I chose to do.
Mm.
So that's been fine. That's a 2-week playoff as well. So maybe I'll get one for one.
Probably a more solid play rather than Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold. Or
Yeah, I think it's easier to bet on the good quarterback with great surrounding weapons versus an average to below average quarterback with good opportunity. Big news.
Definitely better than Andy Dalton in his half a point last week.
Yeah. Saints, Olave and Marcus Lattimore are going to be questionable. Big loss.
Shockingly.
Big loss for the Bengals. Offensive tackle Lyle Collins on injured reserve. That's going to affect Joe Burrow. That's going to affect Joe Mixon and that passing offense. I don't think it's going to be the end-all be-all. I expect that Monday night game, Buffalo and Cincinnati, to be a monstrous affair for both fantasy and in reality. Ravens declare quarterback Lamar Jackson out for Sunday, so it will be Tyler Huntley once again.
Hashtag shocking not.
Yeah. Dennis Allen says Alvin Kamara will be good to go this weekend. He has been away for a couple reasons, personal being one of them. It looks like he will be good to go.
Wonder if he's seeing attorney and prepping for possible legal action.
Yeah, that's still got to happen in the offseason. His whole I punched a guy in Vegas at the Pro Bowl thing. Miko Hardman not going to play against the Broncos, had a setback, so he could be done for the rest of the season. At least for your fantasy, he will be done for sure. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins dealing with a knee issue. I don't expect it to hold him out, but I think the bigger issue is that Colt McCoy, dealing with some concussion symptoms, will not get the start. Might not even be.
We've had a season now where you've had a third string quarterback, and now it's going to be a fourth string.
It'll be David Blau, former Bear extraordinaire, former Lion.
Somebody somewhere will be starting him in fantasy for a championship.
Yeah, Arizona is playing, if I can find them on my list, Atlanta. It's not a bad matchup, all things considered. Carlton Davis for the Bucs and Carl Nassib doubtful to play on Sunday against the Panthers. That is a big game.
Will he be better than McSorley was against the Bucs? Yeah.
I don't think he can be a whole lot worse than he was. So, Josh Norman's going to be activated tomorrow to play against the Bucs for the Panthers. And yeah, that's.
Will T.O. come back to the NFL? Probably not.
No. Antonio Gibson out for the Washington Commanders. They are, of course, playing Cleveland. They must win to keep their playoff hopes alive. They've got a lot of teams charging. Christian Watson, questionable. If he's cleared to play medically, he will play, though. So that's all you're going to wait. Tua is still in concussion protocol, but better than the day before. That is encouraging. We talked about Tua long-term, not the player health, Tua the individual's health at the end of the last show. So it's good to see him at least improving in a way they can announce out. But yeah, it's pretty rough. And then we get to all the injury notifications from last night's game.
That was just an injury bowl.
Yeah, it's that time of year. You got guys that are fatigued, guys that are beat up. That finally gives out on them. It looks like the Titans are ready to mail it in. We'll see about next week. They will get Derrick Henry back. I think Dobbs at least gives them a little bit of hope. If it had been Malik Willis, I think we're both all in on Jacksonville just going in and steamrolling the Titans once again. But I think Joshua Dobbs at least showed enough last night so you have some hope if you're a Titans fan that maybe they can get you into the playoffs and then you get annihilated by the 5 seed.
Gotta admit, he learned the playbook pretty darn quick, even quicker than
aerospace engineer 4.0 GPA from the University of Tennessee. He is a very smart guy, and you saw how quick he was picking up the offense and making changes on the fly. He said the hardest part right now is putting the faces to the names, not necessarily the numbers to the players and all that. But Josh Dobbs I thought was pretty good in relief in really an unwinnable situation going up against that Denver or Dallas Cowboys defense.
Yeah, Denver being good and unbeatable defense would be an alternate reality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way for the Broncos to get out from Russell Wilson and just admit that this was a horrible,
Yeah, because this is
horrible
the
mistake.
is this the nuclear option I heard about?
Yeah, and I don't know all of the details, but there is a way they can just basically go, all right, that was bad. We're not doing this again. Sort of on the same lines as what they're doing with Derek Carr in Las Vegas, with much more of an impact
I
to the cap.
I actually saw a story suggesting Derek Carr could possibly wind up in Tampa if Brady does what everybody think he's going to do and not retire, but maybe move on to somewhere else.
We'll see. Um, trying to find the nuclear option. Denver does cut, release, or trade Russell Wilson's. The salary cap implications would be significant. They can release him before June 1st. In that case, they would absorb
Oh,
$107 million
I don't even want to think about the dead cap
in
and
dead
how
cap.
much that will hurt them. They would
$107 million.
they would be able to acquire or sign anybody with that for like an entire what year, 2 years?
It would be forever. And I just don't see it happen. They can't. They can't. They can't do that to themselves.
After trading all that they traded and
$107 million in dead
million.
cap. If he is traded pre-cap, it's 82 million. If he's released post June 1st, and this might be the key, $39 million in dead cap 2023 and 24, $68 million in dead cap. So at least you can spread it out. And if he's traded after June 1st, it's only 14 million in dead cap in 23. The same dead cap in 24, still 68 million, but they'll actually get a cap savings in the positive of 8 million, whereas all the other ones were negative 85 million, negative 60, and negative 17 million, respectively. So they don't have to keep him, but there is a way out if you so choose to take the cap hit. I kind of think they get a coach that wants to work with Russell Wilson and give it one more year, because the cap hit, the dead cap is going to continue to decrease over time, I believe. So I think that's the way to go. But I don't want to be I
De-
don't want to be that coach.
Denver reminds me of if you're in trouble and no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A team.
I don't know if the A team could help him. All I want to say, and before we go into our picks, I was having a discussion with some people last night. Is Pete Carroll the best coach in football history? Because he not only got a Super Bowl win with Russell Wilson, but was perennially a contender, always had a good roster, and a good winning record. It looks like Russell Wilson is just hot garbage.
Well,
Have we undervalued Pete Carroll for
in
this long?
in Russell Wilson's defense, and I know there's a lot of people that can build a case against him, when Nathaniel Hackett had to hire an assistant to help him make decisions, which is a part of the core role of a freaking head coach.
And I do think that's a big thing to bring up, is that Nathaniel Hackett was a failed experiment. At the end of the day, maybe it's not Nathaniel Hackett just being an incompetent buffoon as a head coach. Maybe Russell Wilson has lost a little bit of it, but Nathaniel Hackett was an absolute train wreck as a head coach. So I think if you're a Broncos fan and you're a Broncos owner or team member, you are hoping that Nathaniel Hackett was 95 or more percent of the problem. And Russell Wilson, give him another offseason to learn a new offense, get him Javonte Williams back, get him Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy fully healthy, another year with Greg Dulcich, and improve that offensive line a little bit. And maybe next year you're going, oh, this is what we were expecting. That's the hope. Maybe you can go get Sean Payton. Maybe you can go get one of these up-and-coming head coach or offensive coordinator. Who's the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys? They talked about him last night, possibly being a head coach.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it too. Former quarterback. Yeah, great podcast. We don't even know the names of people.
That guy.
Yeah. He could be a good one for Kellen Moore. He can be a good option for Russell Wilson because maybe he's got the knowledge and the skill set to talk to Russell Wilson and get him back on board. But I do think Russell Wilson needs to want to be a part of the Denver Broncos, not in his private office. Just want to be a good teammate, good player. Anyways, we both had Dallas correct because it was the free square of the week on your picks. There are a couple, I think, free squares this week in the picks. I don't see us having a lot of different.
I believe Kellen Moore is the name
Kellen
that
Moore.
you're looking for.
He's got a shot, and then Mario Davis, I believe, for the 49ers defensive coordinator. Those are going to be two big names in the offseason for head coaching vacancies.
Hashtag professionals.
How many head coaching openings do you think are going to happen? We already have two in theory between Carolina, or three. Well, Carolina, Indianapolis, and Denver are already technically open. Steve Wilkes has done a good job. So you're already starting with a base of 3. How many more do you think we get?
I can think of 3 or 4 more easily.
Well, I'm going to go through some names here. I don't see Atlanta getting a new head coach. Detroit is not. Chicago's not. How about Arizona? Cliff Kingsbury? You think he survives one more year? Or is he gone?
It might be time for him to go over the cliff.
I think he's gone as well. Jacksonville's good. Denver's already open. Kansas City, not going to get rid of a coach. Miami, New England. Indianapolis already open. The Giants look like they found a guy. Houston.
Yeah. I've actually, before we get to Houston, need to do an audible because actually I was listening to the radio and somebody, I forget who I was listening to, apologies for the person, but they were saying, what happens if you have Bill Belichick come up with once again another losing season? How is that conversation going to progress with Robert Kraft if they're not in the playoffs and they don't even make the playoffs? Granted, Bill Belichick is a face of that franchise, but you just have to wonder how much karma he has left. How much
he's got too much goodwill. He's got too much goodwill with the Patriots. He's going to be a coach of the Patriots until he doesn't want to. I believe he's in his 70s or very close to it. He's got Don Shula's record not on the horizon, but down the line just a little ways. And I think they would really like to see him. If he's going to break that record, he wants to break that record with the Patriots. Actually, he has the same birthday as I am. He's April 16th of 52. So he is 70 years old.
Clicking back to what you were saying with Houston, I actually think the coach is safe just because Houston, I know their record is absolutely horrid and bad, but they've had some fight in them. They've had some games that they could have won. They just really didn't roll over and play dead. So I think because of that, they're not going to fight and they're not going to fire the coach. But, if they just had blowout after blowout after blowout, then it'd be like, okay, bye-bye, bye-bye from highlight. But I tend to think the fight that the Houstons have had will save the coach's job this year.
Yeah.
If they have another horrid season next year, might be bye-bye time.
The only argument I have for Houston is if they're going to bring in a franchise-level quarterback, which is going to be the goal of the next draft.
Because of their high enough draft pick that they're going to get a superstar and they need a new personality.
Well, it's not that. If they're not happy with Lovie Smith now, if they think he's not, I'm not sure he is the long-term answer here. You want the coach that you bring in and the quarterback you bring in to be together. You don't want Lovie Smith to bring in a guy. They go 4-12 or 4-13 next year. You go, Lovie Smith is not the guy. And then you bring in, to throw a name out there, Kellen Moore from the Dallas Cowboys. And Kellen Moore goes, that quarterback's not my guy. Now you've wasted that draft pick. So I think if they're going to make a move, they have to do it this offseason, or they have to sell off that draft pick for just absurd draft capital and maybe kick the can on the quarterback one more year. Maybe what they figured out the last couple of months has been fine. But I don't know. That's the argument for Houston. I agree with you. I don't think he goes. He's put a lot of fight in with his team.
Lovie Smith
has been good.
He's a NFL legend, and besides that, I think he's had an awful deck handed to him this year, and he really needs to have some actual players.
And they've got a ton of draft picks this year. I think Houston's going to have 2 or 3 first rounders and second rounders for the next few years, because of the Deshaun Watson trade and just being a bad team.
Yeah, 'cause he's just had a lot of factors that really have had absolutely nothing to do with him, but he's had to deal with them because those were the cards that he's been dealt.
Yeah, so the Houston Texans have their first round pick, Cleveland's first round pick, their own second, 2/3, a fourth, a fifth, and a bunch of 4, 6. So plenty of picks. They can be aggressive and move up with some of those other picks. So they can fill some gaps, and I believe they're looking at about a $30 million cap space for them. So interesting situation for Houston going forward. But let's go back to some other names. Indianapolis already open. Philadelphia, they're not getting a new coach. New Orleans. I think you look at pretty
He's
much the entire NFC South, but New Orleans,
he has to be gone. This is probably the worst I think I've seen the Saints look in a while. You mentioned some of what the Saints fans have talked about. That it's not exactly encouraging
yeah,
or
it's too much
inspirational,
God.
but it's just been a horrid year for Dalton, for Kamara. Marshawn Lattimore has been injured most of the freaking year. It's just been bad. I think Dennis Allen needs to go.
Yeah, I think he does as well. Debo Samuel's out, officially out. Um, let's go to another team in the NFC South, and it's the one in your hat, Joel. Do we see someone else there?
I tend to think that I don't know who that they're going to get. I know Sean Payton has been tossed out as a. I don't see how that ever happens. That
Got to
they
trade for Sean Payton. They're not going to trade
yeah
him in division.
yeah I just don't see how that happens. But on the other hand, it's hard to believe that you had Byron Leftwich, who was in the chatter for he should be the Jaguars' next coach, and Todd Bowles, who's more defensive than offensive, but this has just been the absolute worst I think I have ever seen the Bucks play. And you have Tom Brady, and I know he's up there in years. Father Time is winning out, but it's just Tom Brady has been the one that has been the most vocal on the sidelines. I know that's not really any personality, Todd Bowles, and what a day and night between Bruce Arians and the current regime. I just don't see how they're brought back next year if they, for whatever reason, don't get in the playoffs. I definitely think that's a guarantee that something happens up top. I don't know who else they're going to bring in since something happened, I think, between Brady and Arians.
Yeah,
Something happened
something had to have
for
happened.
for Arians to be shifted from head coach, and all of a sudden he's now in the front office. So I don't think he's going to be coming back to the head coach because everything was great when it was Tampa Bay and they went to the Super Bowl, but something happened the next year that I don't know what happened, but you heard about the time where uh, they were coming up with all these plays and suggestions and whatnot, and Arians came in and just changed everything. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the cards hold for Tampa Bay, but I don't think Bowles is going to come back. Even if they get to the playoffs and maybe it's a one and done, I think they may move on from him. Just he just doesn't strike me as somebody that can rob the troops. I mean, you had a picture of he was in the locker room trying to get everyone motivated. I think it was Julio Jones had his head down, and it's just you're just sort of looking at the faces, and it's like not a lot of real motivation there. I mean, granted, once again, he's not the Bruce Arians type, total different personalities, but absolutely horrid year. You've had some games that they have lost that you should have won. Cleveland game definitely comes to mind as one of the number one deals you shouldn't have had. Carolina absolutely wiped the floor with them when they did early on. I can't see how he's coming back. I really cannot make any cases for him to come back next year.
Yeah, I think if they make the playoffs, and this goes for New Orleans as well, if they win that division, make the playoffs, it's much harder to get rid of the head coach. So I think Tampa Bay will eventually I think it's either them or I think the winner of the Carolina Tampa game this weekend wins the division.
I definitely I just have a bad feeling it's going to be Carolina that comes in and steals the division from the Bucks at home. It's just I don't know why. I just have I have a bad feeling about this type thing.
All right, let's go through the rest of the league real quick. If there are any of these teams you think will make a coaching change, call them out. I don't see any that I believe, but this is the rest of the options: Dallas, Tennessee, Cleveland, Washington, San Francisco, Las Vegas, the Jets, Seattle, Minnesota, Green Bay, Los Angeles Rams, and Chargers, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Buffalo, and Cincinnati.
Cleveland, I know there's definitely been a lot of criticism. That's easy for me to say of Stefanski, but I don't think it's all entirely his fault because you're basically dealing with two complete different offenses in two parts of the year. You had Jacoby Brissett, who arguably has been better than all of a sudden than the savior of Cleveland. Here he's back, and if you stashed him in fantasy, how much of a disappointment. That's been
bad.
Deshaun Watson. It's two completely different teams, and I don't think you can fault a coach for because it's hard when you're trying to come up with a game plan for two different personalities. And I don't know what happened to their run game. Their run game has just absolutely vanished off the face of the freaking earth. So I don't know how much that is the OC's blame, but I don't think I know it's been a very rough year for Cleveland, but I don't think you can really put everything on the feet of Kevin Stefanski for that blame.
Yeah, I don't think anybody there is at risk. I do think Stefanski is safe because I think Cleveland went into this going, we know this is a lost year. If Jacoby Brissett comes out and plays to the best of his abilities, and Deshaun Watson comes back and is the Deshaun Watson we saw peak Deshaun Watson with the Houston Texans, maybe this team has a shot at the playoffs this year. But I think you go into the season knowing Brissett's probably only going to get you 4 to 5 wins. And if Watson comes back and you win out, you're looking 9 to 10 at best. And then in the AFC, that's probably not going to be enough for sure. So I think he gets by because Cleveland was expecting a down year this year. They went all in to get Deshaun Watson for a reason to pull the rug out from Stefanski after all of that time because Watson hasn't been good his first 3, 4, 5 games back. Seems a little rash, and I think he'll be safe. Other than that, I don't see a shot in heck anybody else is getting fired. So probably not the worst Black Monday coming up in about 9-10 days.
So it might be like maybe three, maybe over under 3, and it's not going to be a very busy day.
Yeah, I would say you put the line at 2.5. I think Arizona. I think at least one of New Orleans and Tampa Bay. I mean, it's going to be tough to see a whole lot more than that. Houston's at least an option. Cleveland has, I guess, some outside potential. Tampa Bay and New Orleans could go. And it seems like sometimes there is just a weird one. Maybe Atlanta does think about making a change, or maybe there's something going on that we don't know about behind the scenes with one of these teams, and they go, we got to make a change. I don't know. I mean, we saw it last year with Coach Brian Flores of the Dolphins. That was a shock. So we'll see. But I would say 2.5 is a good line if you wanted to put a betting line out there. And right now, I would take just 2, I think. But only time will tell. One of those 2 is the Arizona Cardinals. As we get to our picks, they're going to Atlanta to play the Falcons. I think you ignore this for fantasy if it's not James Conner. James Conner's been the only good piece all year long for the Arizona Cardinals, and a running game is fine with a 4th-string quarterback. It's going to be a little tougher if they can't get anything going through the air, but all they have to do is at least get some of those defensive backs to not be in the defensive box for him to be good. Tyler Allgeier's been better the last few weeks, so maybe, just maybe, if you need a deep, dark throw, you lost Derrick Henry, and, well, he was available, so you grabbed him. Could be interesting, but this is not a good game for fantasy. These are 2 bad teams. They've written off this season. They're looking towards 2023, and which one's looking better for the draft position? Which team gets the loss? Which team gets the win? And does that help Cliff Kingsbury retain his job or get fired?
Yeah, you're just looking at when Arizona is starting their 4th flipping string quarterback. That actually makes Ritter, believe it or not, even with how horrid he has been recently, he might be the more competent quarterback here. And I think that it's not a case of picking Arizona. It's a case of you're picking against Arizona. So, yeah, holding my nose and I'm picking Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm taking Atlanta as well. Anytime you get to a fourth string quarterback, it's hard to have enough faith to believe in that team. Arizona is rolling over and dying at an alarming rate. If DeAndre Hopkins can't go, then you're really downgrading your receiving options. Marquise Brown is still good, but then it's Robbie Anderson, then it's Greg Dortch, then it's, Trey McBride. Again, you're looking at this being a ground and pound style of game on both sides. I think Atlanta comes out on top. Next up, a big game in Detroit. Chicago, who has hopes for the number 1 overall pick, and Detroit, who has hopes at the number 7 seed in the NFC playoff go head-to-head. Detroit at home has been an offensive juggernaut, but the defense can't stop anybody. So for fantasy reasons, this could be a very big game. Justin Fields in your lineup, Jared Goff. If you're not locked into one of those top 5 or 6 people, he's someone you should at least consider if he's on your waivers. I think DeAndre Swift's a good play this week. David Montgomery is going to be a good play as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a no doubt play every week guy. Cole Kmet at tight end for the Bears. Decent. I don't know if you get excited about it, but a decent option here. Detroit, 7-8 with a win, at least gives themselves a shot for a win-in game against Green Bay next week, depending on some of these other outcomes. Chicago really would be better off losing at this point, hoping Houston can steal another win and jumping to that number 1 pick. Who do you got?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a no-brainer. You have to wonder as Fields' rush attempts are down over the past 3 games. So, as the coaching staff telling him to sort of getting a little bit more conservative, paying him more attention to what's happening to running quarterbacks out there. And as you mentioned, Detroit has an outside shot to make the playoffs as opposed to a team that has no shot really to do anything except move on to the next season. It's a no-brainer picking Detroit.
Yeah, I'm on Detroit as well. Justin Fields, I think, has got a lot of injury concerns we don't know necessarily the full extent about. I know cramping has been a problem and some minor nicks and bruises, but I just think Detroit has a good mentality. I think I said early on in the season or before the season, I think we're going to be surprised with Detroit. I found myself in season-long pick'em pools, picking them a lot more often than I would think. They started off 1-6, and I felt really bad. Now they're 7-8, and they look like a team that's kind of like Jacksonville on the rise.
Do you know what the best thing about being knocked out of the fantasy playoffs is?
You can enjoy football.
That, but also you don't have to worry about what DeAndre Swift is going to do for the week.
I've avoided having DeAndre Swift, so I don't know that joy yet. But I'm sure in the next couple of years, he's going to fall to a point where I can't say no, and I will have him then. All right, speaking of that number 1 pick plus playoff hope, Jacksonville at Houston. Houston's been very competitive the last month or so of the season, doing it without Dameon Pierce, their star rookie running back. For Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence looks every bit of a quarterback 1 going forward, so I don't think you can bench him, even though Houston's not the best matchup for quarterbacks. Usually get the job done on the ground, which is why Travis Etienne's at least got to be considered, if not in your starting lineup. Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, I think you can play, but again, Houston not the best option against passing offensive because, well, you don't usually have to pass on them for too long. For the Texans, I think it's going to be Brandon Cooks, and that's about it if you are very, very desperate here. Jacksonville, 7-8. The game means nothing to them in the grand scheme of things, but of course you want to win as a professional. You'd rather finish the season 8-9 and losing that last week than 7-10 losing that last week, if that's the argument you want to make. Houston, frankly, cannot afford another win because Chicago, they are going to be playing Minnesota last week of the season. Minnesota might have to play to hold their number 2 seeding. So they're going to have something to play for. Chicago could very easily lose out. Houston with a win would move behind Chicago in that draft. Chicago's not likely to take quarterback, but I think Houston would be better off getting that number 1 pick. Who gets the win?
Yeah, it's on one side of the coin, Houston has significant injuries. On the other side, Houston's history against Jacksonville is definitely interesting as they've won 9 straight games, 15-17, and 20 of 24. But getting back to the other side of the coin, this is a complete different Jacksonville team than previous games. But all being said, I know Houston has had some surprise almost wins. It's like we were talking about why Lovie Smith will still be retained as the head coach because Houston actually fought for him. They have a horrific record, but I think they could easily have been a 7-win team. You just had some different bounces go their way, and they actually had some, what's it called? Oh yeah, decent players. But I mean, I know you have history. I know you have the weirdness of the last 2 weeks. It's almost like a different season from the other parts of the season, but I just have a hard time picking Houston in this. Jacksonville's fired up. They're getting ready for the showdown with Tennessee that I still think Tennessee is going to be absolutely slaughtered. And I tend to think Houston may put up more of a fight than Jacksonville realizes, but Jacksonville's a better team. Picking Jacksonville.
Yeah, Jacksonville is one of the hottest teams in football. They're playing a team that, while giving good fight, does tend to fall on the losing side of things. I kind of expect Houston to come out to a lead and Jacksonville to claw their way back and win this game in the fourth quarter, but I think Jacksonville gets it done. I agree that it looks like it's Jacksonville's division to lose right now. Obviously, one game, it's a playoff game for both teams next week between Jacksonville and Tennessee. One game, it can go either way, but Jacksonville looks like a team that's going to be coming into the playoffs pretty hot if they can get this win here. And we move on to another one where I don't expect a whole lot of discussion here, but Denver going to Kansas City. Kansas City's beaten Denver 119 straight times. My math may be off on that by a couple of games, but I don't think they've beaten Kansas City in the last 7 or 8 years. It's been a while since Denver's beaten Kansas City in any capacity. Russell Wilson, still the quarterback for the Denver Broncos, so that tells you all you need to know. Bench all your fantasy options. I'm being a little facetious. Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton are at least flex worthy. Jerry Jeudy's actually been pretty good for fantasy lately. For Kansas City, you're always going to play Mahomes. You're always going to play Travis Kelce. Jerick McKinnon's been very good, and Isaiah Pacheco's been decent in the last few weeks at running back. Juju Smith-Schuster's been a reliable wide receiver 2-level option pretty much the entire season. And that's probably about it. No Mecole Hardman, so maybe there's a couple other options down the line that we're not thinking about, but Sky Moore, he could pop off at any time, for example. Kansas City needs to win out to have any shot at the 1 seed. Their best bet is to win this week, win next week, and hope Buffalo loses to Cincinnati. Buffalo plays New England week 18, so that's a little less likely for that number 1 overall seed. Denver, they don't have their first round pick. They have Miami's or San Francisco's via Miami, I think is how it actually works out. So the outcome doesn't help or hurt their draft pick. It helps Seattle quite a bit. Russell Wilson, I think, has to prove something in this game, and I think that's the biggest motivating factor for this team. But who gets the win?
Yeah, I know that the narrative out there will be once you fire the head coach up, makes his, all the puns about he couldn't hack it or art, but that it gives the team a boost. I know we saw that, for example, in the Panthers after Matt Rule was fired and Steve Wilkes took over, but it's just hard making a case for the Denver Broncos beating the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's all of a sudden they just rest everyone and say, "Yeah, who cares? Let's just throw it away. Let's rest up for next week." It's just hard seeing that happen, as I know Denver has caused real issues for Kansas City in the past, but yeah, the key factor is that Chiefs need a win to keep pace with Buffalo. Max motivation as opposed to, I know Denver, Russell has to prove himself. I think keeping a pace with Buffalo is the bigger motivation as the ride is almost over in 23. Thankfully, got to pick KC.
Denver was very competitive the first matchup against Kansas City a few weeks ago before Russell Wilson left that game with a concussion. I think Kansas City took them a little lightly. I don't think that happens this time. I think Kansas City rolls pretty heavily in this game. All right, next up, this one I could see going either way. Miami 8-7, currently holding on to the 7 seed. They go to New England to play the New England Patriots, 7-8, just outside the playoffs right now, looking in. A win for Miami eliminates New England, and a win plus a Jets loss clinches the 7 seed for the Dolphins. Now, you might think, well, the Dolphins got a lot of good players. This is a shoe-in. Don't forget, no Tua Tagovailoa. It will be Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Two Gloves behind center. I don't think this puts Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on your bench, but you have to cap your expectations. Championship week, that's not what you want to do with those two players. Top 5 in receiving yards, I think, on the season, each of them. If not, Jalen Waddle is just outside of it. For the Dolphins in the backfield, they haven't given a good commitment to one over the other. Jeff Wilson had the touchdown. Raheem Mostert looks like he's got a little bit more juice, but I almost think you got to have better options than either of those two at this point. So I think for the Dolphins, you're just looking at Waddle and Tyreek Hill. For the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson has had 2 really bad weeks in the last 3. Miami is a pretty good matchup. Breaking news, Greg Dulcich on injured reserve for the Broncos. So one more player to the injured reserve for Denver, most in the league. For New England, Ramondre Stevenson's probably your best bet. Jacoby Myers has been good, but he kind of got a fluky touchdown last week and the week before, the infamous throw the ball to the wrong team and let your quarterback get spiked into the earth in Vegas. So this is kind of one of those matchups where I think in general, you look at these two teams, you go, Miami's the better team. But given the situation with Teddy Bridgewater, maybe you lean towards New England. Joel, I am pretty sure we've talked about this, and I know where you're going to go, but who do you got?
Yeah, just because you look at the main fact is Teddy Bridgewater is in for Tua, and Bridgewater has, he's only played in 2 games this season. He's thrown 3 interceptions. New England has a top 5 defense. Plus, add a little other interesting thing in, potential for weather, wind, and rain. And while you have the fact that Mac Jones and Matt Patricia, they ain't getting along too well, kids. So, yeah, you tend to have that. But I think that Mac Jones might be a more competent quarterback. Yeah, I know, than Bridgewater. So, Dolphins are 0-2 with Bridgewater so far. I know it's you're trying to figure out. Okay, yeah, just because Bridgewater flips the entire narrative from picking Miami. Because when Tua had a chance to play, I was like, okay, well, you got to lock up Miami. But as soon as I saw Bridgewater, I flipped it to New England stealing a win from Miami, as of course the defense can make the difference in a game that Miami needs. But right now, I think I know New England hasn't exactly had a recent decent history either, having only like 1 win, I think, in the last 4 or 5 games. But yeah, I think the inertia is really against Miami right now. And yeah, I'm sorry for your Dolphins. I think New England steals one here. It's going to be a rough day in Gillette Stadium.
I don't think this is going to be a pretty game by any sort of the imagination. I just think the Dolphins have enough talent around Teddy Bridgewater to get the job done. I think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will have to break a lot of short passes into longer gains, and they will have to get Mostert and Jeff Wilson more involved than they did against Green Bay. It's a shame that we're in this position as a Dolphins fan, at least, that you have to count on your backup quarterback to win you a game when you were at 1.8-3. And if you'd have won any of the last 4, you'd probably already have locked up a playoff spot. But New England just seems like a team that is not ready to win, which is weird to talk about under Bill Belichick. But you see them throwing games away, missing field goals and extra points last week that cost them a chance to win that game late. Costly fumbles at bat. It's just a team that doesn't seem to have that killer instinct you need. And I think Miami is going to step up and show what this team can do, even without Tua and maybe for Tua in this case. So I'm going to take Miami here. Maybe I'm just a homer. I mean, it's probably that, but I don't really believe in New England, and it's hard to believe in Miami with Bridgewater, but I just believe in the players a little bit more. All right, next up, Indianapolis and the New York Giants. I think the question here is, how big of a lead are the Colts going to blow this week? Yeah, I don't know if there's a fantasy player on the Colts you're really happy about. You can go for Zach Moss. He's getting a lot of work, but not a lot of production. Michael Pittman's disappeared in the last few weeks. I think Matt Ryan was his best bet to be good, and they're not going back to Matt Ryan. Maybe Jelani Woods at tight end if you're desperate. For the Giants, it's going to be Saquon Barkley, possibly in the list. Not a big fantasy game in New York, it's possible for that rain and wind and not nice weather you were just talking about for New England to be impacting the New York, New Jersey area as well. Giants, I believe, are win and in this week. So big game for the Giants. They're getting a good matchup against the Colts, a team that is imploding. I think they right now have a top 5 draft pick, so wins only hurt them long term. So I think it's in the Colts' best interest to lose. You remember a few years ago when the Jets won 2 late games and cost themselves the number 1 overall pick, and that draft pick went to the Jaguars, who got Trevor Lawrence, and the Jets got Zach Wilson. I don't think the Colts want to win some games right now. That's just my gut feel. Who gets the win?
Yeah, because if Giants, if you look at the first 7 games of the year, pretty much one bad game. Giants have played well the last 2 weeks, as you mentioned, winning they're in. And you look on the other side of that ball, that's Nick Foles starting. Oh, yay, not yay. So, it's not a game. I think you really tend to need a lot of analysis. NYG needs to win bad, win they're in. I think the Colts fall further into the abyss of obscurity. For 23, I'm picking the Giants.
Yeah, Nick Foles is a folk legend in the Philadelphia area, but outside of Philadelphia, he's been Nick Fails. He has not been good anywhere else he's gone. And I think that continues with the Colts for the last 2 weeks of the season. I think the Giants just are a frank better roster from top to bottom, even with some injuries at the wide receiver position. I think the Giants are just too good of a team to lose to the Colts. And maybe with Nick Foles, they won't even have a lead to blow. Who knows? But I think the Giants get the job done. So we are in agreement there, and we will be moving on to the next game. Now, New Orleans going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. No, most likely, no Jalen Hurts. So it'll be Gardner Minshew for the Eagles. I think he's startable in this one, but the Saints have a decent defense. For the Eagles, Miles Sanders is not a start you're confident in, but A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, you can definitely start with confidence, as well as Dallas Goedert. For the Saints, Chris Olave may be back. We'll see. He is questionable right now. Andy Dalton is still the quarterback, so keep that in mind. And Alvin Kamara says he's going to be good to go. So that could be a decent opportunity because you can run on Philadelphia. Philadelphia, 1 win, clinches the number 1 overall seed, locks Dallas into the 5th seed, pretty much makes the seeding only for that 2 and 3 between San Francisco and Minnesota still up in the air, and then your back end 7 seed stuff. So a win by Philadelphia can really lock in the seedings this week. Who gets the win?
Because you're looking at New Orleans as last in the NFL in creating turnovers, and New Orleans on the road has already lost to Carolina and lost by double digits to Pittsburgh Steelers, who are anything but the glorious Pittsburgh Steelers of the past. As I know both teams are playing with max motivation. New Orleans, long shot still to get in the playoffs, but unlike at Atlanta or not so hot Atlanta, they're still mathematically alive. And Eagles are just trying to stay up there and bounce back from the surprise loss to the Cowboys.
And Joel's gone. All right, I'll do my pick while we wait on him to come back. He probably just hit a button. I'm going to take Philadelphia. Philadelphia is just a better team. The Saints, I think, are ready to pack it in. Dennis Allen looks like he's on the hot seat, too much to go, and Joel's back. So let him finish up his spiel in 3, 2. Welcome back, Joel.
As I was saying, both teams playing with max motivation right now. With New Orleans, of course, with the better mathematical chance, but they have to have a whole lot of help. Eagles just trying to stay on top after the surprise loss to Dallas. It's just hard to pick New Orleans even against Minshew.
Yeah, I think New Orleans needs to win out, and the Panthers have to beat the Bucks for them to win the division and get in because they play the Panthers week 18, I believe. So it's an uphill climb. It's doable, but I think the Eagles are just the better team. Minshew showed a lot last week going against a better defense in Dallas, and I think Philadelphia they have too much talent to lose this game. Dennis Allen, I think this is might be the nail in the coffin for him because I believe they are going to be out of it if Carolina wins and they lose. I know they're out of it if Tampa wins. Tampa wins, the division's over. But I'm going to take Philadelphia here as well and just bank on the talent winning out. Next up, we go to arguably the biggest game of the week in terms of ramifications. It's Carolina going to Tampa to play the Buccaneers. It's hard to recommend anybody in this game for fantasy. DJ Moore seems like your best option on the wide receiver spot. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans have been good, not great. Maybe Leonard Fournette. It's a lot of okay. You could play that guy, sure. Hubbard and Foreman have been good, but Tampa Bay's got a good run defense. So this is one of those you probably aren't in a championship matchup if you're relying on these guys to be in your lineup week in, week out, because they've been very disappointing. But big week for both teams. Tampa Bay wins. They clinch the playoff spot. They clinch the NFC South. Carolina wins. They have to win in week 18 to clinch the division or a Tampa Bay loss. And then you have the whole Saints conundrum in play as well. You're a Bucs fan. Tom Brady has a good track record of getting into the playoffs. Very rarely misses. Finds a way to get it done. Can he get it done on Sunday?
Yeah, because the one thing that you have to wonder is who does the NFL want at the playoffs? Do they want Sam Darnold or do they want Tom Brady? I think they definitely want Tom Brady. But, of course, getting out of conspiracy and back to reality, back to life, back to reality, of course. Good news is no major injuries for Tampa Bay. They won the last game, but Carolina did put up 300 yards of rushing against the Lions last week. But Carolina picks on teams that can't stop the run. Tampa Bay, when fully healthy, and they're probably the healthiest they've been recently, I think they can stop the run. The only thing that worries me is, of course, remembering that previous meeting. Carolina stomped. They didn't just beat the Bucs. They freaking stomped them 21-3 earlier this season. But as much as all that tends to cause me to say I have a little bit of a bad feeling about this still. Game is for the division. Bucs have to be motivated here to get the division at home, because if that isn't motivation enough, flying, I don't know what is. Picking Bucs, but I think this game might go either way.
Tampa Bay, that first game was the first game without Christian McCaffrey for the Panthers. So I think there were some unknowns going into that game, which maybe with some time they can sort out on just watching tape. But the Panthers ran all over Tampa Bay that first matchup with Donta Foreman. They seem to be a ground and pound team. I'm taking Carolina. I like what I'm seeing out of Carolina more than I like what I'm seeing out of the Bucs. And I would say this: the Bucs have a better roster. The Bucs have better players. Point blank. You look at the wide receivers: Evans, Godwin over DJ Moore all day. You look at the running back: Leonard Fournette, Rachaad White over Foreman and Hubbard. Quarterback, no question. Andy Dalton is not that guy, but he's basically another Sam Darnold or Tom Brady. I mean, you look at the defenses. You trust the players on the Bucs more, but they're just not cohesive. That goes back to what we were talking about, Todd Bowles. And Steve Wilkes has been a heck of a coach since he's gotten the head role. Hopefully he'll get a shot at the full-time gig, because he's gotten this team that was dead in the water to playoff possibilities, and I'm going to take Carolina. All right, next up, Cleveland at Washington. Cleveland is done. They're not going to make the playoffs again. I think this is a lost season. They knew it coming in. Washington clinging to that 7 seed. If they win out, they will make the playoffs. If they lose a game, Seattle, Detroit, Green Bay, right behind them. They can't afford to lose this game. At the fantasy positions, you got to play Nick Chubb. You just have to. But that could be it. Amari Cooper for the Browns at the wide receiver. That's going to be it. For Washington, no Antonio Gibson maybe makes Brian Robinson a little more active, but the switch to Carson Wentz downgrades Terry McLaurin, maybe upgrades Johan Dotson, but another tough one to recommend to a whole lot of people. Again, if you're relying on these players, you're probably not in the championship matchup, is how this is gone. Nothing much to play for Cleveland except to try and start to find some chemistry to go into 2023 with. Washington, everything to play for with a loss. We've already both picked Detroit. That alone would put Washington outside looking in going into Week 18. Who gets the win?
Yeah, because you're looking at Cleveland as just everything is just their spirits have been crushed with them being eliminated from playoffs and ousted last week, and right now you're looking at a totally completely different Cleveland offense with Watson back under Brissett, fifth best offense in the NFL. Under Watson has had the two worst offenses in the NFL in Week 13 and Week 16 plus. Then you have to wonder about Chubb's health. He's not 100%. He said he's going to play. And how long is Cleveland going to be sticking with him? Washington needs to finish strong, including winning next week. This week should, in theory, be easier. Have to go Washington with not a lot of confidence and have to see how Wentz performs.
I'm taking Cleveland. Carson Wentz worries me. I think Heineke was a spark plug that died out, but I also think he opened up a couple things, especially Terry McLaurin. I think Wentz could limit some of this offense, and it's going to take some time to get back into game rhythm. You see this when players miss some time. I think Cleveland, I think they're good enough. I think they're good enough to put a fight in, and there's going to be upsets every week. I think this just happens to be one of them this week. I'm going to take Cleveland over Washington. Next up, San Francisco at the Jared Stidham-led Las Vegas Raiders. Bench your Raiders. That includes Davante Adams. That includes Josh Jacobs. You're not going to do it. You can't do it, but the matchup is bad. The quarterback situation with Stidham going to Davante Adams is bad. Darren Waller's not going to be a factor. San Francisco has the best defense in football, and then you're pairing it with one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. Josh Jacobs is maybe the only redeemable one, but they shut down the run like crazy as well. So you're going to have to play Adams. You're going to have to play Jacobs, but if you can bench them, it's a good week to be able to do so. For San Francisco, play your Christian McCaffrey. Las Vegas is abysmal against the run. McCaffrey might have 300 combined yards in this one and multiple touchdowns. So if you have McCaffrey in fantasy championship, you probably are going to have a good baseline on his numbers alone. George Kittle has reemerged as a great tight end last couple of weeks with, I think, 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. Brandon Ayuk with no Deebo Samuel, who has now been ruled out, I think has an opportunity to be good here. Brock Purdy is going to be serviceable. Las Vegas has one of the worst defenses in football, which is part of why they don't win games and why Derek Carr is now being asked to stay home. Davante Adams is not happy. This is not a functioning, happy-go-lucky Raiders team. This is a team in complete disarray where San Francisco might be the best team in the NFC since they got Christian McCaffrey, no losses. Do they get a loss on Sunday against Vegas?
Yeah, because it's unbelievable to think about just when the last time a team has on their third string quarterback and they're one of the Super Bowl favorites. And it's crazy with the whole McDaniels and Carr situation going on. Davante Adams chiming in on social media. It's just, both teams could be resting players for different reasons. San Francisco right now, I think they're sitting in the catbird seat. So might be time to rest the first stringers, maybe even limit their snaps. And Las Vegas, technically alive. They might be resting to see what they have a la for the future, meaning next year. Obviously, Derek Carr, he's sent home, not only benched, but inactive. You have to wonder if Josh Jacobs is going to be maybe sat down or severely limited because of his little rant that I'm sure has gone fairly viral. So, yeah, it's hard picking Las Vegas. I know you have upsets every week, but you got to go San Francisco.
Yeah, you're taking San Francisco here. Again, they might be the best team in the NFC. They might be the best team in football since they got Christian McCaffrey. Haven't lost a game. Las Vegas in complete disarray. They're going to play their starters until they don't have to in this game. The San Francisco, with a Minnesota loss, could jump into the 2 seed by the end of the year. And that 2 seed, I think, is a little bit better than that 3 seed spot. Although I think the Giants and whoever gets into the 7th seed are not major contenders, although you don't want to face a hot Detroit Lions team or Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, or even Geno Smith and the Seahawks, if you can avoid it. I think you'd rather play the Washington Commanders at this point. But I think San Francisco's got a lot to play for still, and they will come out and show them who is boss. All right, this next one, this is a big game for the playoff picture on both sides. The New York Jets 7-8 go to Seattle to play the Seattle Seahawks, who are also 7-8. Both teams currently just outside the playoff picture. I already laid out Miami's path to the playoffs. Beat New England, have the Jets lose. The Jets win. It sets up a pretty, I think it's a win-and-end game. I think that would pretty much eliminate everybody else if Miami wins. Now, if New England goes to 8-8 and the Steelers go to 8-8, and some other teams move to 8-8 with the Dolphins and the Jets, then maybe we have a different conversation. But Dolphins win, Jets win, very possibly win an end game right there. Seattle has to win out, has to get a little bit of help with Washington losing at least one game, and then hope the tiebreakers with Green Bay and Detroit work out in their favors, because it looks like there's a chance of a tiebreaker there as well. For the Jets, going back to Mike White, I think this improves the entire offense. I think Zonovan Knight is relevant once again. Michael Carter could be good, but Garrett Wilson gets a huge bump. And Elijah Moore is interesting. Corey Davis is interesting. I think this is going to be a much better New York Jets offense than we saw the last week against Jacksonville on Thursday Night Football in the rain. For Seattle, Kenneth Walker, you're going to start him. The Jets have a good defense, so expect this to be lower scoring than you might want from the Seattle Seahawks, but Kenneth Walker is going to be good. Tyler Lockett, expected to play. He broke his finger 13 days ago, had surgery, expected to play in this one. So Lockett and Metcalf, you're probably not going to have good enough options to bench either one of them. But I would say be cautious with Geno Smith. Again, the Jets have a very good defense. Big game on both sides. The Jets without Zach Wilson, I think, are a much better team than with him. And we'll see what happens with Zach Wilson in the offseason. Seattle has this feel-good quality because of Geno Smith, but who gets the win?
Right now you're looking at, you're mentioning Kenneth Walker, but Seattle has injuries to both of its RBs, and Walker is not 100%. You're still starting him in fantasy. Seattle still has a chance for the playoffs, and they need, even if Seattle wins out, they have about a 70% chance to make the playoffs. If New Jersey wins out, it's about an 87% chance to make the playoffs. And you're just looking at that inertia for Seattle. 6-3 and has gone, that's how they started, but they've gone 1 for 5 since. As in those 9 games, the offense was 4th in pass offense and 20th in rush offense. Has past 6 games, 10th and 30th. So I know Seattle seemed to start out strong, but both teams need a win to stay in, and Seattle has really been faltering of late. The Jets D, I think, absolutely dominates. They make the difference here. I'm picking Jets.
This may be me being a homer as well, but I'm actually going to take the Seahawks because that helps the Dolphins more. I kind of think that getting Tyler Lockett is going to unlock this offense a little bit more. The Jets, yes, they're good on defense, but they have shown cracks at times. And the Seahawks have been a much better team at home. And this is a home game for them. They have a ton to play for. I think their path to the playoff is actually more easy and likely than the New York Jets. So I'm going to take Seattle. This is a tough one on either side. There's no way for the Jets to clinch a playoff spot this week. There is no way for Seattle. So both of them have to play a couple good weeks of football to get in. And I don't know. I just feel like Seattle's going to take this one. All right, this one, big game. Big game for both teams in the standings. Big game for both teams as a way to screw over their primary rival. Minnesota Vikings going to Green Bay to play the Green Bay Packers. The Packers have gotten suddenly hot and found themselves back in playoff contention. A win over Minnesota. They're going to have a very good chance of the playoffs. Washington would need to lose at least one of their last 2 games, and the Packers have to win out. But they at least have a shot where 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we were not talking about it. Minnesota, the number 2 seed. The Eagles with a backup quarterback. If the Eagles fall, Minnesota wins, they still have a shot at the 1 seed. Not to mention, Green Bay would love to be the reason Minnesota fell from having any shot at 1, maybe even down to 3 in the playoff standings. And Minnesota would love to be the reason Green Bay's season ended prematurely. You're playing pretty much your studs in this one. You're going to play Kirk Cousins. You're going to play Justin Jefferson. You're going to play Dalvin Cook. You're going to play TJ Hawkinson. You're going to play less confidently AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones. AJ Dillon's been great the last couple of weeks. Aaron Jones dealing with that ankle injury, probably not as good of a start as Dillon this week. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is going to be a very good option this week because, well, the Vikings pass defense made Matt Ryan look very good for half of that game. And I think he can get the job done. Keep an eye on that Christian Watson injury. If he plays, you got to start him. If not, players like Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, and Romeo Dobbs become even better options. This is a game for my Mega Bowl hopes and dreams. Needs to be a 42-41 style of game. I've got Rodgers, Lazard, A.J. Dillon, T.J. Hawkinson, and Dalvin Cook all in that lineup. So this one needs to be an offensive explosion. It needs to go through those five guys because, well, half those players were not on the same team last time when we did the draft. Hawkinson and Cook at least. So, again, laid it out. Green Bay must win. Cannot afford a loss this week because that door can be closed pretty quickly if Washington gets to win. Minnesota, any shot at the 1, possibly at the 2 seed, would be gone with a loss to Green Bay. So who gets this big, important win?
And key thing here is Minnesota's already in. Green Bay still has a shot at the playoffs. And it's also, for Kirk Cousins, it's not a 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time game. I think that tends to be big as my Minnesota, back and forth when it's a big test this season. And also the other thing is Minnesota will know by the time of the kickoff, if Philadelphia wins their game, Minnesota will have no shot for the 1 seed, would need to 1 win to lock up maybe the 2 seed. So I know everyone is saying, okay, Green Bay is overrated, but Minnesota has been playing poorly right now. All of a sudden, you had the huge comeback against the Colts and then letdown time. So, and Green Bay has been unbelievable. 14 straight games wins in December. That's pretty big, especially they're not almost playoff-esque. Well, it is a de facto playoff game, and Minnesota has won the division, so they're going to be either a 2 or 3 seed, so they don't have much to fight for here. Unlike Green Bay, who has more motivation, and I tend to think Green Bay stuns Minnesota, but ultimately it matters more for Green Bay than Minnesota, as that's the main thing to focus on this time of year. I'm picking Green Bay.
I think this is going to be a very high-scoring shootout game. I want that to happen for the Mega Bowl, but these are not great defenses. These are very high-powered offenses when they get when they get the thing going. If Watson is in play, I mean, you remember the first play of the season was a guaranteed 75-yard touchdown to Watson against the Vikings that was dropped, and it kind of set off a bad tone for the Packers. They've overcome that. Minnesota is a dome stadium. They're going to Green Bay the first weekend in January. It's going to be cold. You don't need weather. You don't need wind. It's going to be cold. They get a little bit of wind. That can throw off some of these players a little bit. And Green Bay, there's something going on with Green Bay right now that you can't quantify. And with that, I'm taking Green Bay as well. I think the playoff prayer is still alive. I have Washington losing. That would actually make this Detroit-Green Bay game in Week 18 a win and end. And I think if you're a Packers fan, that's all you can really hope for right now. Give yourself a shot to win out and get in and just maybe get in. Maybe you knock out the Vikings in the playoffs and you have a very happy start to the new year. But I'm going to take the Packers in this one. Then we move to the Battle of LA. Anything else on Packers, Vikings? No. Battle of LA, the Los Angeles Rams, who suddenly looks decent behind Baker Mayfield, going to the same stadium they call home as the road team to play the Chargers, a team that LA doesn't even want. And the going to the playoffs Los Angeles Chargers. So for the Rams, Cam Akers has been very good the last few weeks. He is definitely reemerging as an option in fantasy backfields. I know for my Mega Bowl team, I picked him up a few weeks ago. Thankfully, I did. He's been great since I've grabbed him. So I think he's in your lineup. If you're in a super flex league, Baker Mayfield's interesting. I don't think he's a great start here, but the Chargers have a bad run defense. Cam Akers should be great. Tyler Higbee's been good. He's really the best pass option for the Rams at this point. For the Chargers, keep an eye on Austin Eckler's health. He's been on the injury report. I don't think he misses this game. I don't think there's a big risk of that, but keep an eye on it. Keenan Allen's been a PPR monster the last few weeks. Justin Herbert has been disappointing for fantasy, but good in reality. But I think Eckler is going to be good. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are your starters for the Chargers. Chargers still have hopes that the 5 seed could still technically fall to the 7 seed if they win out or lose out and things go the right way. But the Chargers in the playoffs, not a ton to play for. Could be smart with some load management concerns here. The Rams, though, have been better of late. So maybe not as much of a layup as we would have thought a few weeks ago for the Chargers. But do the Chargers at least get this win?
Yeah, because the one question I think you tend to ask is, what do you do if you are the Chargers? A win helps, but it might be more beneficial. You mentioned load management. If you rest your players, your key players, take the loss, and they have the Broncos next week, which might be a good tune-up. Hard to pick the Rams unless the Chargers go into absolute total I don't give a flip mode, and then they just sort of coast into Week 18. So yeah, I know Mayfield has been amazing, but I got to pick the Chargers.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Chargers as well. I don't think they bench the starters because they won't know their odds of getting that number 6 or the 5 seed until later. Pittsburgh plays Baltimore in the nightcap. If the Chargers win, Baltimore loses. I don't know where the tiebreaker goes between them, but they would be tied. Baltimore plays Cincinnati the last week of the season. Cincinnati may need that win to wrap up the division. So that could be a big game. The Chargers have to play this out. I do expect to see a little bit more Joshua Kelly and some Josh Palmer in places you might not normally see them, just to get a little bit of wear and tear, but not enough to bench Eckler or bench Allen or to bench Mike Williams. I just think you'll see a little bit more of the backups to keep that load light. I think the Chargers get the win. I think the Rams are going to compete better. I think this could be a more highly contested, higher scoring game than you're expecting. I do honestly think Cam Akers is a great fantasy option, a riskier one, but a great fantasy option nonetheless this week against a bad Chargers defense against the run. But ultimately, the Chargers get the job done. Next up, Pittsburgh at Baltimore, the nightcap. The Steelers, 7-8, still have an outside shot at the wild card. They do have to win out and get a lot of help. Baltimore's clinched the playoff spot. They're playing Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Pittsburgh looks like a much better team the last few weeks. Maybe it's just because, I don't know, Kenny Pickett's starting to figure things out in the NFL. This team's coming together in a good way. Najee Harris has looked as good as he's looked in the last few weeks. So Najee's in your starting lineup. Deontay Johnson getting on a bit of a tear. Still no touchdowns on the season, but at least PPR and receptions and yards wise, he has been good. Pat Freiermuth at the tight end position. He's dealing with an injury, but I think he's too good to bench. Then you go to Baltimore. Tyler Huntley's been bad, and it really diminishes Mark Andrews. It diminishes Demarcus Robinson. And then we've seen some inconsistency with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards' usage. So it's hard to recommend anybody on the Baltimore side for fantasy goodness. You're going to play Andrews. He's too good to bench. But for the rest of them, you might have some better options. Pittsburgh 7-8 has a lot more to play for at this point. Not only the Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season narrative that they'd like to keep going. Reminder, they play Cleveland week 18 to wrap up the season. So they could win out and get to 9-8. But their playoff aspirations hold in the balance. A loss, and they are pretty much screwed. With a win, they might at least be alive, depending on Miami's the only team that can really knock them out this week. And if Miami loses, they're probably still going to be alive. Baltimore in as the 5 seed. Their only real benefit is the 5 or 6. If they lose this game, it's not going to make a big difference. With a win, they play a win and win the NFC or AFC North battle with Cincinnati the week after, which I personally don't see Baltimore competing in without Lamar Jackson, but maybe he's back for that game. All right. Big week for both teams. Who gets the win?
Yeah, because you're looking at Baltimore and bad offense, really good defense. Lately, Pittsburgh has just been playing better. Some kind of switch has been flipped. The Steelers are way more motivated, I think, than the Ravens. Plus, actually better quarterback since Lamar Jackson isn't in for the Ravens again. I think the Steelers get a surprise win. You also have the fact that Tomlin's winning season, that sort of hangs in the balance. And I think the Steelers really tend to pull together to try to get a winning season. I have a hunch Baltimore won't rush Lamar Jackson back this week. They didn't. And yet, Cincy might be a different story next week, but I think the Steelers steal a win here, as I think they're marginally the better team of the two.
Yeah, I don't have any faith in Tyler Huntley, so I'm going to take Pittsburgh as well. Pittsburgh is a team that you got to remember next year is going to be much more in contention than they are this year. So I'm going to take the Steelers. And we move on to the game of the week. Monday Night Football. This is going to determine many fantasy football championships. It's Buffalo at Cincinnati. That means Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Devin Singletary, Dawson Knox, Gabe Davis, all probably in your lineup, as well as for the Bengals, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, maybe Tyler Boyd in deeper leagues, all in your lineup. This is a big game. I know I've got a fantasy lineup that's going to have at least both of these quarterbacks in the super flex and possibly Devin Singletary. So there's going to be championships won and lost on Monday Night Football for fantasy. The reality side of things is both teams are playoff teams. Cincinnati with a win and a Baltimore loss clinches the AFC North. That would give them a week to rest players if they so choose. Now, if they beat Buffalo and Kansas City finds a way to stub their toe, they have the tiebreaker over both Buffalo and Kansas City. You can still get the 1 seed. Buffalo wins out, gets the 1 seed. They get New England week 18, a much easier matchup. So this is the last hurdle to that 1 seed that you would consider a very likely stumbling block if there is one out there. Big game. A lot of talent on the field. A lot of ramifications in the standings. Just all around colossal. The fantasy football owner's sweat is going to be real on Monday Night Football. Who gets this very important win?
Because if Buffalo wins, of course, they're probably the number 1 seed. If they lose, they're probably not. And getting the bye in the playoffs is very important, as this is pretty much a pick'em game with a big impact on who will get to the Super Bowl. And both teams have definitely had near misses recently. Buffalo almost lost to Miami, and Cincinnati had to hold off New England. I think Cincinnati's twin-pronged attack on the ground, Mixon and Perine, might be the edge here. It's a hard game to pick. I know there's going to be a lot of love for Buffalo, but I've got to pick Cincinnati. Just as you said, this game will decide so many fantasy championships. I think Cincinnati is on a mission to get back to the Super Bowl and win. I think they do a surprise upset and win here.
I'm taking Buffalo. That's 5 different picks this week for the two of us. At this point, I'm just going to take what I feel is the better team. This is an absolute pick'em. If Cincinnati won this game and won it convincingly, I wouldn't be shocked. If Buffalo came out and won this game convincingly, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm taking Buffalo because I think Josh Allen has something just a little bit more special than Joe Burrow at this point. Cincinnati, yes, are the reigning AFC champions, but I think Buffalo feels like they need to make another statement win. They've stepped up against Miami in a revenge game. They stepped up against Baltimore early in the season. They stepped up against Kansas City, Tennessee when we thought Tennessee was a real deal. This is their chance to beat all of the top teams in the AFC in the regular season and say, you know what? We've done it before in the playoffs. We can do it again. I just think Buffalo is a slightly better team. I think Devin Singletary is going to be a much better factor than you might think. I'm actually considering benching Mike Evans for Devin Singletary, and I don't like that that's even a consideration.
Considering how Mike Evans has done recently, I wouldn't blame you.
That's in that league where I've got Burrow and Allen going. So that would be 3 very key pieces to a lineup on Monday Night Football to determine that title. And my opponent is going to have James Cook. So it's a big fantasy week. I'm going to take Buffalo, but I expect if you follow fantasy football websites or Facebook pages or fantasy footballers podcast type of stuff, you are going to hear what people need from Monday Night Football to win a championship all day, from probably Sunday at 7:00 at night before Sunday Night Football all the way through kickoff on Monday night. That is a game everybody's going to be looking forward to. just to watch. It's going to be two great teams going at it, but I'm going to take Buffalo. I think Buffalo is just a little bit better right now,
Before
and
we
they have a lot to play.
before we get to final thoughts, can I do a did they really post that as opposed to did they really do that?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a report. I think this is from the Heavy on Lions Facebook page, and it says report Lions coaching staff watching Bills film to stop Justin Fields. And my one whole thought was, aren't coaches supposed to do that?
Yeah. Maybe it's because they phrased it that way, watching Bills film, because the Bears did just play the Bills. Maybe it's the way they phrased it that it's kind of like, wait, what are they doing now? Why would you watch Bill? Yeah, that's not good reporting. Yeah. Also, Devontae Adams giving the finger to his team on Instagram. That was fun. Did they really post that?
Well,
Anyways.
there was another fun tweet where Devontae Adams was responding to somebody who was Mark Davis, but I think it was a fake account because you can do that so easily on Twitter these days, and especially with the new verification system. But Devontae Adams was like, "Well, I came to Las Vegas, so I wanted to play with Derek Carr. So why did I come here?" And I'm editing the reply. Well, you wanted to come to Vegas because it was a Mark Davis account that replied. I don't think it was the actual Mark Davis, as it was the Mark Davis one that replied with, "I'm trying to edit this. Yeah, you came to sniff stuff and go out with escorts." I think I cleaned that up a little bit, and then Devontae Adams replied with, "Fair enough, complaint retracted." And I think it was
to sniff kitties and hang out with ladies of the night.
Yeah, I think he deleted the tweet because I was like trying to find it. I'm like, I can't find this anywhere on the timeline. I think it went into another dimension.
Someone's got it somewhere. All right, with that, it's time for final thoughts. Joel, I've got two if you don't hit one of them.
There was somebody named Ian Hartitz. Hopefully I said your name right. If I didn't, apologies. How to optimize fantasy football, and you'll definitely will agree with three of these things, maybe more. I know you won't agree with the first one, which is move championships to week 16. Number two, end all bye weeks by week 13.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
3, eliminate kickers.
I like that. Well, let me go back to point 2 real quick. If you move your championship to week 16, that means the first round of your playoffs right now, week 14, could have bye weeks. That's one reason I'm against that. So if you fix that second point, move the bye weeks to week 13, I still don't agree with the week 16 championships, but at least I can go, okay, well, at least you're not going to the bye weeks.
Okay, number 4, half PPR.
Okay.
5, which you already have done in both leagues, add a flex. You've added 2.
Yeah.
6, make sure there are no kickers.
Yeah, there's going to be a trend. Yeah.
7, add a last place punishment. I know we haven't done that yet.
We can't in the 16 teamer, especially when it's hard to get 16 active players. But
yeah,
I like it.
8, no trade vetoes unless obvious collusion.
Yep.
And the final one, number 9, ban kickers.
This was written by Ryan Gilchrist of the Sports Shelf. Now, I agree with all those other than the week 16 thing. I know the week 16 thing was people going, Derrick Henry and Pollard. It's like, you're going to risk injuries any week of the season. So moving it up a week only cuts your enjoyment of fantasy football 1 week. So I don't agree with that one, but I get it when people are like, oh, they bench players. And it's like, yeah, that's part of the risk. Like, if you're going to bench players with 2 weeks left, congratulations, your team's great, and that sucks for you. But that's such a rarity that everything's clinched and locked up 2 weeks out. And, Tennessee didn't have a game that mattered, and okay, sorry, bad luck. That can happen in week 16 too. That can happen at other weeks. So I don't necessarily agree with that one. But the rest of it, yeah. Ban kickers, no kickers, get kickers out of your league. Definitely agree with that one. Get rid of those week 14 bye weeks. That's just a little too late for me. Personally, I'd rather see them get rid of them by week 12. Maybe start them a week earlier if you have to and get them all done by week 12. Have everybody go in the last few weeks of the season. And definitely, I think anytime you put PPR points out there, half or full. I prefer full in a lot of situations, but half is very, very balanced. It's a good time. And yeah, you need flexes. You can't just have that boring quarterback, 2 receivers, 2 running backs, tight end, defense since we got rid of
Especially with
kicker.
how tight ends have done this year. Good God.
Yeah. I mean, we went in the 16 teamer and got rid of a mandatory tight end. It's optional. You can still pick up Travis Kelce and play him. You just don't have to have a tight end. I think that worked out fairly well. We'll see if we retain that next year. All right, I've got two just over the top. What the hell is going on type of stories. The first one from this morning reported Bucks quarterback Blaine Gabbert helped save 4 people from sunken helicopter after emergency landing. Basically, Blaine Gabbert and his family were out jet skiing near Davis Islands in Florida, and a helicopter went down near enough to them that they were able to jet ski over and help pull the people from the wreckage, took them back to shore. So Blaine Gabbert saving lives, doing the right thing. What are the odds? Like, could you imagine how weird that is? You're a Bucks fan. It's like, oh, I'm going to the beyond. I'm drowning in a helicopter that crashed. Is that Blaine Gabbert? Am I actually dead already? Like, I can't imagine. But Blaine Gabbert doing the right thing, which is not a theme in story number 2. Chiefs superfan arrested in Texas, charged with armed bank robbery. Xavier Bubadar, who is known as the diehard Kansas City fan who dresses as a wolf, was arrested for robbing a bank before the game against the Houston Texans. He apparently went to rob the bank in the wolf costume without the Chiefs. Yeah, without the Chiefs, the jersey, shirt, but in the hat. But still, the same wolf outfit that he wears every Sunday on the Jumbotron. Yeah.
That's like the joke that's been going around social media. I'm help, I'm being chased by a wolf. Where? No, a regular one.
Yeah. So yeah, arrested on December 16th, charged him with armed robbery and numerous other charges. Oh man, if you look at this guy's Twitter feed, he's dying to say he robs banks. Like, he's like, I hustle on the side. Oh, if anybody ever had a gun to your head, you'd know. It's like, oh my god. This goes with the guy for another Chiefs super fan, Helmet Man, who is on the terrorist watch list with connections to the bombing in 1993 of the World Trade Center, and a couple Chiefs fans that beat the crap out of each other, X Factor and something else. And yeah, the Chiefs got a lot of weirdos that root for them, but still not as weird as Buffalo. So that is the good, the bad, and I guess the ugly from fandom and players. Before we go, let's just go over some of the clinching scenarios. Bills clinch home field advantage in the AFC with a win and a Chiefs loss. Cincinnati clinches the AFC North title with a win and a Baltimore loss or tie, or a Cincinnati tie and a Baltimore loss. We've seen ties this year.
The two
Miami.
The two that decide by the game for the division, Titans and Jags, and of course Bucks and Panthers.
Yeah, we'll get to those here shortly. But Jags Titans next week is a win and in for sure. Dolphins clinch a playoff berth with either a win and a Jets loss, or a tie, a Jets loss, and a Steelers loss or tie. So Miami can tie and find a way to back in as well. For the NFC, Philadelphia clinches the NFC East title with a win or a Dallas loss, which we already know is not going to happen this week. Philadelphia clinches the number 1 seed with a win or a Philadelphia tie, Minnesota loss, or the other one is not possible with Dallas already winning. Tampa Bay clinches the NFC South title with a Tampa Bay win. If they lose, they cannot clinch in any way, shape, or form. The Giants clinch a playoff berth with a win or several options with a tie, including losses by Seattle and Washington, Seattle and Detroit, Washington, Detroit, and Green Bay losses, all of those with a tie. Or they can clinch with a Seattle loss and a Washington loss on their own. Seattle loss, Detroit loss, Green Bay loss, or Washington, Detroit, Green Bay. So The Giants are in pretty good shape. I think they win and get in this week. And then the Commanders can clinch a playoff spot this week with a win, a loss by Seattle, a loss by Detroit, and a loss by Green Bay, which means they don't have the tiebreaker over any of them if it came down to it with that one tie in there. Whew. It's a long podcast, so I'm flying Ryan Gokert along with
Tampa Motormouth Joel Verlin as we wrap up by the time that we normally start.
Yeah, I mean, it's still early for us, so enjoy week 17. Enjoy your fantasy football playoffs. Super Bowl of Suck semifinals going on right now. Recapping the matchup: Steelers, Broncos, Bears, Cardinals, AFC and NFC championship game for the Super Bowl of Suck. The worst team will reign supreme.
It's almost time for
a happy and safe new year to everybody out there. Don't do anything we wouldn't do, and God forbid you do anything we would do.
Don't do anything those super fans did.
Yeah, definitely don't do anything the Chiefs super fans would do because that gets you arrested. And with that, we go.